The bullet that grazed Evelyn Zimmerman's shoulder in the back alley of that Denver boarding house taught her that trusting the wrong man could get you killed. And as she rode into Sacramento, California in the summer of 1872, with nothing but a worn leather satchel and $17 to her name, she swore she would never make that mistake again. Sacramento bustled with activity as the afternoon sun beat down on the dusty streets. Wagons rolled past carrying supplies from the railroad depot, and merchants called out their wares from storefronts lining the main thoroughfare. Evelyn guided her tired mare toward the first hotel she spotted, her shoulder still aching from where the wound had healed poorly during her 3-week journey west. She had left Colorado in the dead of night, not bothering to collect the rest of her belongings from the room she had shared with Thomas Reed, the man she had foolishly believed loved her enough to protect her from his gambling debts and the dangerous men who came collecting. She had been wrong about everything, about love, about safety, about the future they had planned together. When those men burst through the door looking for Thomas, he had used her as a shield, pushing her forward as he scrambled out the window. The bullet meant for him had found her instead, and by the time she dragged herself to a doctor, Thomas was long gone with what little money they had saved. The Sacramento hotel stood 3 stories tall, its white paint peeling in the relentless California heat. Evelyn dismounted carefully, wincing as the movement pulled at her shoulder. A young boy approached, eyeing her horse with professional interest. "Stable your mare for 2 bits, miss," he offered. She nodded, handing him a quarter and her reins. Inside, the hotel lobby was mercifully cool with a ceiling fan rotating slowly overhead. The clerk, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked up from his ledger. "I need a room," Evelyn said, her voice hoarse from days of sparse water and endless dust. $3 a week, meals included," he replied, studying her with the calculated assessment of someone used to sizing up potential trouble. She counted out the money, watching her small fortune dwindle. The clerk pushed a key across the counter. "Room 12, 2nd floor. Breakfast at 7, supper at 6. The room was small but clean, with a single bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. Evelyn set down her satchel and collapsed onto the mattress, every muscle in her body crying out for rest. But rest would not pay for next week's lodging. Tomorrow she would need to find work. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of gunfire and Thomas's face twisted with cowardice as he abandoned her to save himself. She woke before dawn, her clothes damp with sweat in the summer heat, and forced herself to dress. The mirror above the washstand showed a woman who looked older than her 23 years, with dark circles under green eyes and auburn hair that desperately needed washing. She did her best to make herself presentable, braiding her hair and changing into her only other dress, a faded blue cotton that had seen better days. Breakfast in the hotel dining room consisted of biscuits, gravy, and weak coffee. Evelyn ate mechanically, planning her strategy. She had worked as a seamstress in Denver before Thomas convinced her to quit and rely on his earnings from the freight company. Another lie. He had spent most of his time at poker tables, borrowing money from increasingly dangerous people. After breakfast, she walked the streets of Sacramento, stopping at every shop, every business, asking about work. The milliners did not need help. The general store had a full staff. The laundry already employed 3 Chinese women who worked for half what anyone else would accept. By noon, her feet ached and her hope had begun to crack. She found herself on the outskirts of town, where the businesses gave way to ranches and open land. A large stable sat adjacent to a sprawling property marked by a hand-painted sign that read, "Whitfield Ranch and Livestock Trading." Horses filled the corrals, their coats gleaming in the sunlight as ranch hands moved among them with practiced efficiency. Evelyn hesitated at the edge of the property, watching a man work with a particularly spirited bay mare in the nearest corral. He moved with an easy confidence, speaking in low tones as the horse circled him, gradually closing the distance. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His clothes were work-worn but clean, and there was something in the gentle patience he showed the skittish mare that made Evelyn's chest tighten with an emotion she could not quite name. The mare finally approached, allowing him to stroke her neck. He rewarded her with something from his pocket, murmuring praise. Only then did he seem to sense Evelyn's presence, turning to look directly at her. "Can I help you?" he called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. Evelyn straightened her shoulders despite the ache and approached the corral fence. "I am looking for work, any kind of work." He walked over, his gait unhurried, and she saw that his eyes were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds over mountains. His face was tanned and weathered, but she guessed he was no more than 30. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a roguish appearance that might have made her heart flutter once, before she learned how little a handsome face meant. "What kind of work can you do?" he asked, not unkindly. "I can sew, cook, clean. I am good with figures. I can read and write. I am a hard worker." She heard the desperation creeping into her voice and hated it. He studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. "What is your name?" "Evelyn Zimmerman." "Nathan Whitfield," he said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect that seemed automatic. "This is my family's ranch. My father runs the livestock trading business, but I manage the horse training operation. We are not hiring at the moment, but my mother might need help in the house. She has been complaining about being overwhelmed since our last housekeeper married and moved to San Francisco." Hope flared in Evelyn's chest. "I would be grateful for the opportunity to speak with her." Nathan opened the corral gate and secured it behind him. "Come on, then. She will be in the main house." She fell into step beside him as they walked toward a large ranch house set back from the barn and corrals. It was a handsome structure, 2 stories with a wraparound porch and flower boxes under every window. Someone had planted roses along the walkway, their blooms a riot of red and pink against the dusty earth. "How long have you been in Sacramento?" Nathan asked as they walked. "I arrived yesterday." "From where?" "Denver." She did not elaborate, and something in her tone must have communicated that she did not wish to discuss it further, because he simply nodded and asked nothing more. The interior of the house was cool and well-appointed, with furniture that spoke of comfort rather than ostentation. A woman in her early 50s emerged from what appeared to be a kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She had the same blue-gray eyes as Nathan, and though her hair was streaked with silver, she moved with energetic purpose. "Mother, this is Evelyn Zimmerman. She is looking for work, and I thought you might speak with her about the housekeeping position." Martha Whitfield's gaze was sharp but not unkind as she assessed Evelyn. "Have you kept house before?" "Yes, madam. I grew up helping my mother run a boarding house in St. Louis before she passed. I can cook, clean, do laundry, and mending. I am organized and reliable." "Why did you leave Denver?" Martha asked bluntly. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Personal circumstances that no longer concern me." Martha exchanged a glance with Nathan, and some wordless communication passed between them. "I do not pry into people's pasts unless they bring trouble to my door." "Will your personal circumstances bring trouble here?" "No, madam, I can promise you that." "Can you start tomorrow?" Relief washed through Evelyn so powerfully that her knees nearly buckled. "Yes, thank you. Wages are $8 a week plus room and board." You will have a room in the house, meals with the family, and Sundays off unless we are entertaining. I expect honest work and discretion. We rise at 5. Are those terms acceptable? More than acceptable, madam. Martha smiled for the first time, softening her stern features. Good. Nathan, help her collect her things and bring her back before supper. She can settle in tonight and start fresh in the morning. The ride back to town in Nathan's wagon was quiet at first. Evelyn kept her hands folded in her lap, trying to process the sudden turn in her fortune. She had expected to spend weeks searching for work, watching her money dwindle to nothing. You got lucky, Nathan said finally. Mother has been searching for help for 2 months. The last 3 women she interviewed were either incompetent or unsuitable for various reasons. I will not disappoint her, Evelyn said firmly. I believe you. He glanced at her sideways. You have the look of someone running from something. As long as that something does not follow you here, you will find the Whitfields to be fair employers and decent people. It will not follow me, Evelyn said, and prayed it was true. At the Sacramento hotel, Nathan waited with the wagon while she collected her few belongings and settled her account with the clerk. Within an hour, she was back at the ranch, being shown to a small but comfortable room on the 2nd floor of the main house, right next to the sewing room and across from Martha's own chambers. Supper that evening was her first meal with the Whitfield family. In addition to Martha and Nathan, there was Samuel Whitfield, Nathan's father, a gruff but good-humored man in his late 50s who ran the livestock trading business, and Nathan's younger sister, Caroline, a lively 18-year-old who talked animatedly about the upcoming town social and who was courting whom. Evelyn ate quietly, speaking only when spoken to, trying to gauge the dynamics of this family she now found herself part of. They were easy with each other in a way that spoke of genuine affection, teasing and laughing over shared stories and inside jokes. It made something in her chest ache, remembering her own family before illness had taken her mother and scattered her siblings to various relatives across the country. After supper, Nathan found her on the back porch where she had stepped out for air, overwhelmed by the kindness she had been shown. "Are you all right?" he asked, leaning against the porch railing. "Yes, your family is very kind. They are good people." He was quiet for a moment, looking out over the darkening landscape. "My mother lost a daughter a few years back. My older sister, Margaret, she died of pneumonia. Sometimes I think Mother throws herself into taking care of others because it helps her deal with the grief." "I am sorry for your loss," Evelyn said softly. "Thank you." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt exposed under that steady gaze. "Whatever happened to you in Denver, whatever brought you here, you are safe now. I want you to know that." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. She had spent so long being strong, refusing to break down, that his simple offer of reassurance made her eyes burn with unshed tears. She blinked them back furiously. "I appreciate that," she managed. He nodded and straightened up. "Get some rest. Mother will have you up before the sun." Evelyn settled into her new life at the Whitfield Ranch with determined efficiency. She rose before dawn to help Martha prepare breakfast for the family and ranch hands, then spent her days cleaning, mending, doing laundry, and whatever else needed doing. The work was hard but honest, and she threw herself into it with single-minded focus, trying not to think about Denver, about Thomas, about the life she had lost. Martha proved to be a patient teacher, showing Evelyn how she liked things done, and within a week, they had developed an easy working rhythm. Caroline delighted in having another young woman in the house, often sitting with Evelyn while she mended clothes or prepared vegetables, chattering about her friends and her hopes for the future. Nathan was harder to read. He was polite, always respectful, but he kept a certain distance that Evelyn appreciated. She caught him watching her sometimes when he came in for meals or stopped by the house for something, his expression thoughtful. But he never pressed her with questions about her past or made her uncomfortable with unwanted attention. It was nearly 3 weeks before the careful walls she had built around herself began to crack. She was hanging laundry in the yard behind the house, her arms aching from wringing out heavy sheets, when one of the ranch hands came running from the barn, shouting for help. Evelyn dropped the shirt she was holding and ran toward the commotion, her heart pounding. A crowd had gathered near the largest corral where a black stallion, wild-eyed and frothing, bucked and kicked at anything that came near. One of the younger hands, barely more than a boy, lay crumpled against the fence, blood streaming from a gash on his head. "Someone get the doctor," Martha shouted, pushing through the crowd. She dropped to her knees beside the injured boy, pressing her apron against the wound. Evelyn did not think. She just moved, running for the house, her old instincts from helping her mother nurse boarding house residents through various injuries taking over. She gathered clean cloth, water, and the medical kit she had seen in the kitchen, then raced back to the corral. Martha looked up as Evelyn knelt beside her. "The doctor is 20 minutes away at least." "Let me," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She examined the wound, relieved to see it looked worse than it was, the head bleeding profusely as head wounds did, but not deep enough to be fatal. She cleaned it efficiently, her hands steady, then bandaged it tightly. "We need to get him inside and watch for signs of concussion," she said. "Keep him awake and monitor his pupils." Nathan appeared beside them, having apparently just arrived from wherever he had been working. "I will carry him." He scooped the boy up easily and headed for the house. Evelyn spent the rest of the afternoon sitting with the injured hand, whose name was Peter, making sure he stayed conscious and coherent. By the time the doctor arrived from town, she had already done everything necessary, and he simply confirmed her assessment and care. "You have medical training?" he asked, impressed. "My mother ran a boarding house. I learned by necessity." That evening, after Peter had been declared out of danger and settled in a spare room for observation, Samuel Whitfield found Evelyn in the kitchen where she was finally getting around to preparing supper. "My wife tells me you saved young Peter's life today," he said gruffly. "I did what anyone would have done, sir." "Not anyone. Most people would have panicked." He studied her with the same assessing look his son sometimes wore. "We are lucky to have you here, Miss Zimmerman." Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you, sir." After Samuel left, she found her hands were shaking, the adrenaline finally leaving her system. She braced herself against the counter, breathing deeply, trying to calm down. "You did good today." Nathan's voice from the doorway made her jump. He stepped into the kitchen, concern evident in his expression. "Are you all right?" "Yes, just the excitement catching up with me." He crossed to her, and she noticed he was carrying something in his hands, a cup of tea which he set on the counter beside her. "My mother swears by chamomile for steadying the nerves." The simple gesture of kindness, so unexpected, broke something loose inside her. To her horror, tears began streaming down her face before she could stop them. She turned away quickly, mortified, but Nathan was already there, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "It is all right," he said quietly. "You are allowed to fall apart a little." "I do not fall apart," she said fiercely, swiping at her tears. "I cannot afford to." "Why not?" "Because if I start, I might not stop." The words came out before she could censor them, raw and honest. Nathan was silent for a moment. Then, very carefully, he turned her to face him. His hands on her shoulders were warm and steady, grounding her. "What happened to you?" Evelyn looked up at him, at those storm cloud eyes full of genuine concern, and something inside her crumbled. I trusted someone I should not have. I believed him when he said he loved me, that we would build a life together. I gave up everything for him. And when trouble came, he used me as a shield and ran. I was shot because of his cowardice and I lost everything. The words hung in the air between them. Nathan's expression darkened with anger, but she could tell it was not directed at her. "Where is he now?" Nathan asked, his voice low. "I do not know. I do not care. I just want to forget it ever happened." "Did you love him?" Evelyn considered the question. "I loved who I thought he was, but that man did not exist, so no, I suppose I did not love him at all." Nathan's thumbs moved in small circles on her shoulders, a comforting gesture he probably was not even aware he was making. "Not all men are cowards." "I know that." She did know it, intellectually, but knowing it and believing it were two different things. "You deserve better than what he gave you," Nathan said firmly. "You deserve someone who would take a bullet for you, not push you in front of one." The conviction in his voice made her breath catch. She realized suddenly how close they were standing, how warm his hands felt through the thin fabric of her dress, how her heart was beating faster for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. She stepped back, breaking the contact, needing distance. "I should finish supper." Nathan let his hands drop but did not move away. "Evelyn." She made herself look at him. "If you ever need to talk or just need someone to listen, I am here." "All right," she nodded, not trusting her voice. He left her then, and she sagged against the counter, her heart racing. This was dangerous. She could not afford to feel anything for Nathan Whitfield, no matter how kind he was. She had learned that lesson the hard way in Denver. Trust led to vulnerability, and vulnerability led to getting hurt. But over the following weeks, keeping her distance from Nathan proved increasingly difficult. He seemed to be everywhere, finding excuses to come by the house, to check on how she was settling in, to share small moments of conversation. He never pushed, never made her uncomfortable, but his presence was a constant, steady thing that she found herself looking forward to despite her better judgment. One evening, about 6 weeks after she had arrived at the ranch, Caroline convinced Evelyn to attend the town social with the family. Evelyn had been reluctant, preferring to keep to herself, but Martha insisted, saying she needed to get out and meet people if she was going to make Sacramento her home. The social was held in the town hall, a large wooden building that had been decorated with bunting and lanterns for the occasion. A fiddle band played lively music while couples danced, and townspeople gathered in groups to gossip and catch up on news. Evelyn felt out of place in her simple dress, watching Caroline whirl around the dance floor with a young man she had been sweet on. Martha had been pulled into conversation with a group of ranchers' wives, and Samuel was discussing business with other local businessmen. She stood near the refreshment table, sipping weak punch and wondering how soon she could politely suggest returning home. "You look like you would rather be anywhere else," Nathan said, appearing at her elbow. She jumped, then laughed at herself. "Is it that obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way." He grinned at her, and she noticed, not for the first time, how it transformed his face, making him look younger and more carefree. "I only come to these things to keep Caroline happy. She thinks I need to socialize more." "Your sister seems determined to see everyone around her enjoying life as much as she does." "That is Caroline in a nutshell." He paused, then held out his hand. "Dance with me." Evelyn hesitated. "I am not much of a dancer. Neither am I. We will be terrible together." Despite herself, she laughed and took his hand. He led her onto the floor just as the band struck up a waltz. His hand settled at her waist, warm through the fabric of her dress, and she placed her hand on his shoulder, hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. They moved together awkwardly at first, both of them clearly unpracticed, but gradually they found a rhythm. Nathan was right. They were not good dancers. But there was something unexpectedly pleasant about stumbling through the steps together, laughing when they nearly collided with another couple, falling into an easy synchronization that felt natural despite their lack of skill. See. Not so terrible, Nathan said, his eyes crinkling with amusement. You are a terrible liar. We are awful. But we are awful together, which is better than being awful alone. The simple statement, meant as a joke, hit her with unexpected force. Being together was better than being alone. When had she started to believe that again? The song ended and another began, faster this time. Nathan pulled her along gamely, and Evelyn found herself genuinely smiling, genuinely enjoying herself for the first time in months. The weight she had been carrying since Denver seemed to lighten just a fraction, and she let herself have this moment, this small taste of normalcy and joy. They danced 3 more songs before Caroline cut in, breathless and glowing, insisting that Nathan dance with her friend Emma while she introduced Evelyn to some of the other young women in town. Evelyn found herself pulled into a circle of friendly faces, welcomed with genuine warmth, and realized that Martha had been right. She had been so busy protecting herself that she had forgotten how to live. On the ride home that night, squeezed into the wagon between Caroline and Nathan while Martha and Samuel sat up front, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Caroline chattered happily about the evening, about who had danced with whom and what everyone had worn, and Nathan made dry comments that made them all laugh. It felt, Evelyn realized with a pang, like family. That night, lying in her small room listening to the sounds of the house settling around her, Evelyn let herself acknowledge what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was developing feelings for Nathan Whitfield. Real feelings, not the infatuation she had mistaken for love with Thomas, but something deeper and more frightening. She admired his patience with the horses, his kindness to his family, the quiet strength he showed in everything he did. She liked the way he looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth knowing. She enjoyed his company, his dry humor, the way he seemed to understand when she needed space and when she needed someone to break through her solitude. And that terrified her. Because caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant the possibility of being hurt again. She did not think she could survive another betrayal, another loss. The next morning, she resolved to be more careful, to rebuild the walls Nathan had been steadily dismantling with his steady presence and quiet kindness. But Nathan seemed determined to make that impossible. He started bringing her things. Small things, thoughtful things. A book he thought she might enjoy. Wildflowers he had seen growing on the far pasture that reminded him of the roses she had admired by the house. A new pair of work gloves when he noticed hers were worn through. He never made a big production of these gifts, just left them where she would find them, sometimes without even acknowledging they were from him. He also began seeking her out in the evenings after supper, when the day's work was done. They would sit on the back porch, watching the sun set over the California hills and talk. Not about anything particularly profound, just the small details of their days, stories from their pasts, dreams for their futures. Nathan told her about his plan to build up the horse training operation until it was the most respected in California. Evelyn found herself sharing memories of her mother, of growing up in St. Louis, of the dreams she had once had before Thomas and Denver derailed everything. "What do you want now?" Nathan asked one evening about 2 months after she had arrived at the ranch. Evelyn considered the question. "I want stability, safety, a life that is my own." "That is what you want to escape from. What do you want to move toward?" She looked at him, surprised by the insight. "I do not know. I have spent so long just trying to survive that I have not thought about actually living." You should think about it, Nathan said softly. Life is too short to only survive. His words stayed with her, burrowing into her thoughts at odd moments. What did she want? The question felt simultaneously too simple and impossibly complex. Summer gave way to fall, and Evelyn marked 4 months at the Whitfield ranch. She had found her rhythm there, had become indispensable to Martha and a valued member of the household. She had even made friends in town, other young women who invited her to quilting circles and church socials. She was building a life, exactly what she had said she wanted. But increasingly, she found herself watching Nathan when she thought he was not looking, her heart doing complicated things in her chest when he smiled at her or touched her hand in passing. She caught him watching her too when he thought she was not aware, his expression unguarded and full of something that made her breath catch. The tension between them grew, unspoken but undeniable, until it felt like the air itself crackled with electricity whenever they were in the same room. It came to a head in October. Nathan had taken a string of horses to a ranch 2 days' ride north, and Evelyn found herself anxiously waiting for his return, unable to concentrate on her work, jumping at every sound that might signal his arrival. When he finally rode up 4 days later, dusty and tired but grinning because the deal had gone better than expected, she had to physically restrain herself from running out to meet him. That evening, she was in the kitchen preparing dough for the next day's bread when Nathan found her. The house was quiet, everyone else already retired for the night. "You are up late," he said, leaning against the door frame. "Needed to get this started so it can rise overnight." She did not look at him, keeping her attention focused on kneading the dough. "Did you miss me?" The question, asked lightly but with an undercurrent of seriousness, made her hands still. She should deflect, make a joke, maintain her distance. Instead, she heard herself say, "Yes." The word hung in the air between them, weighted with all the things she had not been saying for months. Nathan moved into the kitchen, coming to stand across the work table from her. "Evelyn, I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "All right. I am falling in love with you." He said it plainly, without poetry or pretense, just honest truth. "Actually, I think I have been falling for you since that first day you showed up at the ranch, looking like you were ready to take on the world despite everything trying to break you. And I know you are not ready to hear that. I know you are still healing from what happened in Denver, but I needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you." Evelyn felt like all the air had been sucked from the room. Panic clawed at her throat, warring with a fierce joy she was afraid to acknowledge. "Nathan, I cannot do this. Cannot or will not. Both, neither, I do not know." She pressed her palms flat against the table, flour dusting her hands white. "You do not understand what it was like. What he did to me. I trusted him completely, gave him everything, and he nearly got me killed. How am I supposed to trust again after that? How am I supposed to believe that you would not do the same thing? Because I am not him," Nathan said fiercely. "I would never, never use you that way. I would die before I let anyone hurt you." That is what Thomas said too in the beginning. All the pretty words, all the promises. They meant nothing when it counted. Nathan circled the table, and she forced herself not to retreat even though every instinct screamed at her to run. He stopped close enough that she could feel his warmth but not touching her, respecting her space even now. "I am not asking you to trust me today," he said quietly. "I am not asking you to jump into anything or make promises you are not ready to make. I am just asking you to consider the possibility. To let me show you over time that I mean what I say. I will wait, Evelyn, however long it takes. I will be here being patient, earning your trust one day at a time. You set the pace. You tell me what you need. I will wait." Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. What if I can never trust again? What if I am too broken? Nathan reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. You are not broken. You are careful, and you have every right to be. But Evelyn, being careful and being closed off are not the same thing. You deserve to be loved, really loved, by someone who sees you for who you are and thinks you are extraordinary. You do not know me well enough to think that. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you are kind, even when you have every reason to be bitter. I know you dropped everything to help Peter when he was injured, that you never complain even when I know your shoulder still bothers you sometimes, that you care for my family like they are your own. I know you look at the sunset like it is a painting made just for you, and that you hum when you are cooking, and that you have nightmares sometimes that you try to hide, but I hear you pacing at night trying to shake them off. I know enough. And what I do not know yet, I want to learn. Evelyn closed her eyes, overwhelmed. Everything in her wanted to believe him, wanted to let down her guard and step into the future he was offering. But the fear was still there, sharp and insistent. I am scared, she whispered. I know. And that is all right, be scared, I will still be here. She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. At the honesty in his face, the patience in his eyes, the way he stood there offering her everything and asking for nothing in return except the possibility of a chance. I cannot promise you anything, she said. I am not asking for promises. I need time, you have it, all the time you need. She nodded slowly, her heart feeling too big for her chest. Nathan stepped back, giving her space again, and she felt the loss of his nearness like a physical ache. Finish your bread, he said softly. Get some sleep. We will figure this out together at whatever pace you need. All right, all right. He left her then, and Evelyn sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. She sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time, her mind spinning, her heart pulling her in a dozen directions at once. Over the following weeks, Nathan kept his word. He did not push, did not pressure her, but he was there, a constant, steady presence in her life. They fell back into their evening conversations on the porch, but now there was an openness between them that had not existed before. Nathan had laid his cards on the table, and Evelyn found there was something freeing in knowing where he stood, in not having to guess or wonder about his intentions. She watched him with the horses, saw the patience he showed the most difficult animals, the way he never forced anything but instead worked to build trust over time. She watched how he treated his family, his employees, everyone he encountered, with respect and basic decency. She paid attention to the small things, the way he always made sure she had enough firewood before winter set in, how he fixed the squeaky step outside her room without being asked, how he included her in family decisions like her opinion mattered. Slowly, incrementally, her fear began to ease. Not disappear, but loosen its stranglehold enough that she could breathe. November brought cooler weather and preparations for winter. The ranch became a hive of activity as they prepared for the leaner months ahead. Evelyn threw herself into helping Martha preserve food, repair clothes, and ensure the house was ready for colder weather. One afternoon, she was in the barn collecting eggs from the chickens kept in the back stalls when she heard voices from the main area. She recognized Nathan's voice and another man's, unfamiliar and aggressive. I told you, we are not interested in selling, Nathan said, his tone firm but controlled. The railroad is coming through whether you like it or not, Whitfield. Smart men sell now and get a good price. Stubborn men get forced out later for pennies. My father has already spoken with the railroad representatives. We have an agreement that protects our property. Agreements can be renegotiated. Everything is for sale at the right price. Not this ranch. Now I have asked you politely to leave. Do not make me ask again. There was a tense silence, then the sound of boots on the barn floor moving toward the entrance. Evelyn stayed hidden in the back, not wanting to get involved in what was clearly a business dispute. She heard a horse gallop away, then Nathan's frustrated sigh. She emerged from the back with her basket of eggs. Nathan was standing in the middle of the barn, his hands on his hips, staring at the entrance with a dark expression. "Everything all right?" she asked. He turned, his expression softening when he saw her. "Just some men from a land speculation company trying to pressure us to sell. They have been circling like vultures, buying up properties between here and the railroad expansion. Father is not interested, but they keep sending people to try to change his mind. Will they cause trouble?" "I do not know. I hope not, but men who make their money manipulating others are not usually the type to take no for an answer gracefully." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I am sorry you had to overhear that. I have heard worse." She set down the basket and moved closer to him. "Is your family in any danger?" "No. The law is on our side and we have legal contracts protecting our land. They are just annoying, like mosquitoes that will not go away." Evelyn hesitated, then reached out and touched his arm. The gesture was small, but it was the first time she had initiated physical contact with him, and she saw his eyes widen slightly in recognition of that fact. "If you need anything, I am here," she said softly, echoing the words he had said to her so many times. Nathan covered her hand with his own, his touch warm and gentle. "Thank you." They stood that way for a moment, connected, and Evelyn felt something inside her settle, like a piece clicking into place. She was not ready yet, not completely, but she was getting there. Winter arrived in earnest in December, bringing rain that turned the roads to mud and kept everyone close to home. The forced proximity meant Evelyn spent more time with Nathan, working side by side on indoor tasks, playing cards with the family in the evenings, sharing stories around the fireplace. Christmas came, and Martha insisted on a full celebration despite the weather. They cut down a small pine tree and decorated it with popcorn strings and paper ornaments. Caroline played the piano while they sang carols. Martha cooked a feast that took 3 days to prepare. It was the first real Christmas Evelyn had experienced in years, and she found herself getting swept up in the warmth and joy of it despite her usual reservations. On Christmas morning, she woke to find a package wrapped in brown paper on her dresser. Inside was a beautiful shawl, knitted from soft wool in a deep green that matched her eyes. A note in Nathan's handwriting read simply, "So you will stay warm. Merry Christmas." She wore it all day, and when Nathan caught her eye across the dinner table, his smile made her heart skip. That evening, after the family had retired and the house was quiet, Evelyn found Nathan on the back porch despite the cold. He was bundled in a heavy coat, looking out over the ranch blanketed in mist. "Thank you for the shawl," she said, stepping out to join him. "It is beautiful." "You are welcome. I wanted to get you something special." "Why?" He looked at her, surprised by the question. "Because you are special to me." Evelyn pulled the shawl tighter around herself. "I have been thinking about what you said, about not asking for promises but asking for possibilities." Nathan went very still. "And? I think I am ready to consider those possibilities. Not everything, not all at once, but maybe we could start, carefully, slowly." The smile that broke across Nathan's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Slowly is good, carefully is fine. "Whatever you need. I need you to understand that I am still scared, that I might panic and pull away sometimes. I understand. And I need you to be honest with me, always, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. I can do that." She took a deep breath. "Then yes, let us try this." "Whatever this is." Nathan reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She did not. His fingers laced with hers, warm despite the winter cold, and it felt right in a way that made her throat tight. "Thank you for trusting me," he said quietly. "I promise I will do everything I can to be worthy of it." They stood together in the cold, hands joined, and Evelyn let herself hope, really hope for the first time since Denver, that maybe she could have this. That maybe she could have a future that included love and partnership, and all the things she had given up believing in. The winter passed, and with it came a gradual deepening of their relationship. Nathan courted her properly, with a patience and thoughtfulness that made her feel cherished in ways she had never experienced before. He took her on buggy rides through the countryside when the weather permitted, showing her the boundaries of the ranch and his favorite spots on the property. He brought her to town socials and dances, always attentive but never possessive, making sure she felt included and comfortable. He kissed her for the first time in late February, after they had been courting for nearly 2 months. They had been walking along the creek that ran through the Whitfield property, admiring the early wildflowers starting to bloom despite the lingering chill in the air. Nathan had reached for her hand, and she had taken it naturally, easily, the gesture having become comfortable between them. "I want to kiss you," he said, stopping and turning to face her. "May I?" The fact that he asked, that he gave her the choice, made her feel safe in a way that nothing else could have. "Yes." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was soft, sweet, asking rather than demanding, and Evelyn felt something in her chest unfurl like a flower opening to sunlight. She kissed him back, letting herself feel the warmth, the connection, the rightness of it. When they pulled apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for 8 months." She laughed, a little breathless. "It was worth the wait." Yes, it was. Spring arrived, bringing with it a flurry of activity on the ranch as they prepared for calving season and began training the new crop of young horses. Evelyn had been at the Whitfield ranch for nearly a year, and somewhere along the way, it had stopped being just a place she worked and had become home. She and Nathan had settled into a relationship that felt solid and real. They had not talked about marriage yet, both content to let things develop naturally, but there was an understanding between them that this was heading somewhere permanent. Nathan made sure his family knew he was serious about her, including her in long-term plans and future discussions, as though her presence was a given. In April, 1 year after her arrival in Sacramento, the land speculators who had been bothering the Whitfields made their most aggressive move yet. Samuel and Nathan had gone to town for the weekly supply run when 3 men rode onto the property, demanding to speak with the owner about selling. Martha met them at the front porch, Evelyn standing beside her, and firmly told them they were not interested and to leave. The men did not leave. Instead, they became threatening, suggesting that accidents could happen to ranches that did not cooperate, that fires could start mysteriously, that livestock could disappear. "Are you threatening us?" Martha asked, her voice cold as ice. "Just explaining the reality of the situation, madam. Men who work with us prosper. Men who do not find life becomes difficult." Evelyn felt anger surge through her, hot and righteous. She had been victimized once by cruel, selfish men. She would not stand by and let it happen again, not to the people who had become her family. "You need to leave," Evelyn said, stepping forward. "Now, before we call the sheriff." One of the men laughed, looking her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "Who are you, sweetheart?" "I am someone who knows that threatening a rancher's wife on her own property is a crime. I also know that trespassing after being told to leave is illegal. And I know that the Whitfields have legal contracts protecting their land that no amount of intimidation will change. So I suggest you get back on your horses and leave before you find yourselves in jail." The men's expressions hardened, but before they could respond, the sound of hoofbeats announced Nathan and Samuel's return. Both men took in the scene instantly, their faces darkening with fury. Nathan dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, moving to stand between the strangers and Evelyn and his mother. "What is going on here?" "Just having a friendly conversation," one of the men said, though his tone was anything but friendly. "My wife and Miss Zimmerman seem to think otherwise," Samuel said, his hand resting casually on the pistol at his hip. "And I trust their judgment absolutely. I believe you were just leaving." The tension stretched taut for a long moment. Then the lead man shrugged, a gesture meant to communicate that this was not over. "We will be seeing you, Whitfield. Think carefully about your choices." They rode off, and the moment they were out of sight, Nathan turned to Evelyn, his hands on her shoulders. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" "No, we are fine. But Nathan, they were making threats. Real threats about burning the ranch or hurting the livestock." "Son of a bitch," Samuel growled. "Martha, get inside and write down everything they said, exactly as you remember it. We are going to the sheriff." That evening, after Samuel and Nathan returned from filing a report with the sheriff, the family gathered in the living room to discuss what had happened. The sheriff had promised to keep an eye on the property and had warned that if the speculators returned or made good on any threats, they would be arrested. But everyone knew that such promises only went so far. "We should hire extra hands," Nathan said. "Men who can keep watch, make sure nothing happens to the stock or the buildings." "That will cut into profits," Samuel pointed out. "Not as much as losing everything to fire would." Martha, who had been quiet, spoke up. "We are not going to let some bullies drive us off land that has been in this family for 20 years. We will do whatever we need to do to protect what is ours." Caroline, looking frightened but trying to be brave, nodded. "We stick together." Evelyn felt pride swell in her chest for these people who had taken her in, who faced threats with courage rather than running. "I will help however I can." Nathan looked at her, his expression intense. "You have done more than enough. Standing up to those men today took courage." "I learned from watching you with the horses," Evelyn said softly. "Sometimes when something pushes you, you have to push back, not with force but with firm boundaries." Samuel laughed, breaking some of the tension. "The woman is wise, Nathan. Better hold on to her." Nathan met her eyes across the room, and the look he gave her was full of such love and certainty that it made her breath catch. "I intend to." The weeks following the confrontation were tense. The Whitfields hired 2 additional ranch hands specifically to keep watch, and Nathan or Samuel made sure someone was always alert, especially at night. But the feared retribution never came. The land speculators, perhaps deterred by the sheriff's attention or by the Whitfields' clear refusal to be intimidated, moved on to easier targets. As the immediate danger passed, life on the ranch returned to normal. But something had shifted for Evelyn during that confrontation. She had stood her ground, had protected people she cared about, and had not broken. The scared woman who had arrived in Sacramento a year ago felt like a different person. She was stronger now, more sure of herself, and more importantly, she was learning to trust again. Not blindly, but carefully, choosing to believe in people who had proven themselves worthy. On a warm evening in early May, Nathan asked her to take a walk with him after supper. They strolled toward the creek, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I have been thinking," Nathan began, "about the future, about what I want my life to look like." Evelyn's heart began to beat faster. And every version of that future I imagine has you in it." He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Evelyn, I know we have only been courting a few months, and I know you needed time to heal and learn to trust again. I have tried to be patient, to give you space to find your footing. But I need you to know that I am serious about you, about us. I am in love with you, completely and totally, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. Are you asking me to marry you? Not yet. Not until you are ready. But I am telling you that when you are ready, the answer I am hoping for is yes. I am telling you that I am committed to this, to you for the long term, and I am asking if you feel the same way. Evelyn looked at this man who had shown her what real love looked like. Patient love, kind love. Strong love that did not demand or manipulate, but simply offered itself freely and waited for it to be reciprocated. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and betrayal in Denver that had nearly broken her, and how this gentle, steady cowboy had helped her piece herself back together, without even realizing that was what he was doing. I feel the same way, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I love you, Nathan. I think I have loved you for months but was too scared to admit it, but I am not scared anymore, or at least not so scared that it stops me from living. You taught me that. Nathan's smile was brilliant. So when I ask you properly, with a ring and everything formal, you will say yes. When you ask me properly, I will say yes. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and she felt completely safe, completely loved. When he kissed her, it was with the promise of a future they would build together, a life they would share. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon after church, Nathan asked Samuel's permission to marry Evelyn, a formality since everyone knew where things were heading. Samuel gave his blessing enthusiastically, and Martha cried happy tears. That evening, Nathan took Evelyn to their spot by the creek and properly proposed with a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. Evelyn said yes without hesitation, and when she looked at the ring on her finger, she felt nothing but joy. They were married in early July in a simple ceremony at the church in Sacramento, surrounded by the Whitfield family and the friends Evelyn had made in town. She wore a dress Martha had helped her sew, white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, and carried wildflowers from the ranch. Nathan wore his best suit and looked so handsome, it made her heart skip. When the preacher asked if she took Nathan to be her lawfully wedded husband, Evelyn looked into those storm cloud eyes and said, "I do," with absolute certainty. When Nathan kissed her as his wife for the first time, she felt like she was finally home. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed the entire town. There was dancing and laughter and joy, and Evelyn felt so full of happiness she thought she might burst with it. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Nathan pulled her aside. "Ready to see your wedding present. You did not need to get me anything. You already gave me everything. This is different, come on." He led her to a small cottage set back from the main house, nestled among a grove of oak trees. It was charming and compact, freshly painted with a front porch and window boxes already planted with flowers. "I have been working on this for months," Nathan explained. "I thought we should have our own space, a home that is just ours. It is small, but we can add on as our family grows if you want to, if that is something you want." Evelyn turned to him, overwhelmed. "You built us a house." "Well, I had help. Father and the ranch hands pitched in. And Mother insisted on the window boxes." He looked suddenly uncertain. "Do you like it?" "Like it? Nathan, I love it, I love you." She threw her arms around his neck, kissing him soundly. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "Far from perfect, but I will spend every day trying to be the man you deserve." They went inside together, and Evelyn explored their new home with wonder. It was beautifully finished, clearly a labor of love. There was a kitchen with a new stove, a living area with furniture Nathan had built himself, a bedroom with a large bed covered in a quilt Martha had made, and even a small room that could serve as a study or, eventually, a nursery. "I cannot believe you did all this," Evelyn said, running her hand along the smooth wooden walls. "I wanted you to have a place that was yours, where you always felt safe and loved," Nathan said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "A place where we can build our life together." That night, in their own home for the first time, Nathan carried her over the threshold and made love to her with a tenderness that made her cry happy tears. Afterward, lying in his arms, Evelyn reflected on how far she had come from that scared, wounded woman who had ridden into Sacramento 15 months ago. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, running his fingers through her hair. "That I am glad I did not give up on trusting people. That I am glad I took a chance on you. I am glad you took a chance on me too, and Evelyn, I promise I will spend the rest of my life proving that your trust was not misplaced. You already have." The months that followed were some of the happiest of Evelyn's life. She and Nathan settled into married life with an ease that felt natural, dividing the household chores and responsibilities between them, working side by side during the day, and falling into bed together each night, exhausted but content. Evelyn continued to help Martha at the main house, but now it was by choice rather than obligation. She had become a true daughter to Martha and Samuel, and her relationship with Caroline had deepened into genuine sisterhood. In October, Evelyn realized she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after supper, nervous despite knowing he would be thrilled. "I think I am going to have a baby," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Nathan's eyes went wide. Then he let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down, worried he had been too rough. Sorry, are you all right? Should you be standing? Do you need to sit down?" Evelyn laughed, delighted by his frantic concern. "I am fine. Pregnant women do not break easily." "We are going to have a baby," Nathan said, as though testing the words. Then louder, "We are going to have a baby. The whole ranch can hear you." "I do not care. This is the best news ever." Martha and Samuel were equally thrilled when they shared the news, and Caroline immediately began planning to be the best aunt in California. The winter passed with Evelyn's belly gradually swelling, and Nathan became almost comically protective, insisting she rest more, not lift anything heavy, and take a dozen other precautions that both exasperated and endeared her. Their son was born in late May of 1874, 2 years after Evelyn had arrived in Sacramento. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Evelyn wondered if she would survive it, but Martha was there coaching her through, and Nathan never left her side, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation. When the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Evelyn looked down at his red face and shock of dark hair and fell instantly, completely in love. "He is perfect," she whispered. "He is," Nathan agreed, his voice choked with emotion. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but had not settled on anything. Now, looking at her son, Evelyn knew exactly what felt right. "Samuel," she said. "After your father, Samuel Nathan Whitfield." Nathan kissed her forehead, then gently touched his son's tiny hand. "Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world." The baby wrapped his fingers around Nathan's thumb, and Evelyn saw tears slide down her husband's cheeks. It was the first time she had seen him cry, and it made her love him even more. Life with a newborn was chaotic and exhausting, but also wonderful. Nathan was a devoted father, waking in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours simply holding Samuel and marveling at him. Evelyn watched her husband with their son and felt her heart grow bigger than she ever imagined possible. Samuel grew from a tiny, helpless infant into a chubby, happy baby who smiled easily and rarely fussed. Caroline doted on him, and Martha and Samuel Sr. were besotted grandparents who could not get enough time with their namesake. When Samuel was 6 months old, Evelyn and Nathan took him for a walk to their spot by the creek, where so many important moments in their relationship had taken place. It was a beautiful autumn day, the air crisp and the leaves beginning to turn. "You ever think about Denver?" Nathan asked as they sat on a blanket, Samuel contentedly playing with his toes between them. Evelyn considered the question. "Sometimes, but it feels like it happened to a different person, like that was someone else's life." "Do you have any regrets about Denver?" "Only that I wasted time on someone who did not deserve it. But if it had not happened, I would not have ended up here. I would not have found you, or this life, or our son. So maybe everything needed to happen exactly as it did to get me where I was supposed to be." Nathan reached over and took her hand. "I used to think about what my life would look like, who I would end up with. I imagined someone local, someone I had known forever. I never imagined someone like you would ride into my life and change everything. Someone like me. Someone strong enough to rebuild herself from scratch. Someone brave enough to trust again after being betrayed. Someone who makes me want to be better every single day." He lifted her hand to his lips. "You are extraordinary, Evelyn Whitfield, and I fall more in love with you every day. Even when I am covered in baby spit up and have not slept in 3 days. Especially then." She laughed and leaned over to kiss him, careful not to disturb Samuel. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." As they sat together in the dappled sunlight, watching their son discover his hands with intense fascination, Evelyn thought about that terrified woman who had arrived in Sacramento 2 years ago, barely holding herself together. That woman had been so sure she would never trust again, never love again, never risk the vulnerability that came with opening her heart. But Nathan had been patient. He had waited, giving her all the time she needed to heal, never pushing, just being steadily present until she was ready to take a chance. And that chance had given her everything she had never dared to dream of again. The land speculators never returned. The sheriff's attention and the Whitfields' firm resistance had been enough to send them looking for easier targets. The ranch continued to prosper, with Nathan's horse training operation gaining a reputation throughout California for producing quality mounts. Samuel Sr.'s livestock trading business remained strong, and the family weathered the ups and downs of ranching life together. Over the next few years, Evelyn and Nathan's family grew. They had a daughter, Rose, when Samuel was 2, and then another son, James, 2 years after that. The little cottage Nathan had built became too small, so they added on, expanding it into a proper house with enough bedrooms for their growing family and a large kitchen where they gathered for meals. Caroline married a rancher from a neighboring property and moved just a few miles away, close enough to visit regularly. Martha and Samuel Sr. aged gracefully, eventually turning over most of the day-to-day ranch operations to Nathan while remaining active and engaged with their grandchildren. Life was not without its challenges. There were droughts that tested the ranch's resources, illnesses that frightened them, the normal struggles of raising children and managing a business and balancing all the competing demands of life. But they faced everything together, Nathan and Evelyn, partners in the truest sense, on their 10th wedding anniversary. Nathan surprised Evelyn with a trip to San Francisco, just the two of them for 3 days while Martha and Samuel watched the children. It was the first time they had been alone together for more than a few hours since Samuel was born, and Evelyn felt like a young woman again as they explored the city, ate at restaurants, and spent long nights talking and making love without fear of being interrupted by a crying child. On their last evening in the city, they stood at the wharf watching the sun set over the bay. Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind, and Evelyn leaned back against him, perfectly content. "You remember when I first told you I loved you?" Nathan asked. "In the kitchen when you were making bread, of course. You said you would wait as long as I needed. I meant it. I would have waited forever for you." Evelyn turned in his arms to face him. "You did wait. You were patient when I needed patience, and steady when I needed someone to be my anchor. You gave me the time and space to heal, and you never made me feel broken or damaged for needing it. You were never broken. You were just hurt, and you had every right to protect yourself. But you showed me I did not have to protect myself from you. That was the gift you gave me, Nathan, not just your love, but the safety to accept it." She touched his face, tracing the familiar lines she knew so well after a decade together. "You saved me in a way. Not from danger, but from a life where I never trusted anyone again. You showed me what real love looks like." "We saved each other," Nathan said softly. "I was drifting before you arrived, going through the motions of life but not really living. You gave me purpose, a reason to be better. You made me want to deserve you. You already did." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, and Evelyn felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt the first time he kissed her by the creek all those years ago. Some things, she had learned, never faded when they were real. Back at the ranch, life continued its rhythms. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Rose was all energy and mischief, keeping everyone on their toes. James was still just a toddler, but already showing signs of being the peacemaker among his siblings. Evelyn sometimes took time in the evenings, after the children were in bed, and Nathan was finishing up work in the barn, to sit on the porch of their home and reflect on her journey. She thought about that bullet in Denver, about the pain and betrayal that had nearly destroyed her. She thought about the long ride to California, desperate and alone, and convinced she would never be whole again. And then she looked around at the life she had built. The home, the family, the love that filled every corner of her days. She had been so certain that trusting again was impossible, that the risk was too great. But Nathan had been willing to wait, to be patient, to prove through actions rather than words that he was worthy of the trust she was so terrified to give. He had kept his promise. Every single day for 10 years, he had shown up for her, been there for her, loved her with a steadiness that never wavered. And in doing so, he had taught her that not all love ended in betrayal, that not all men were cowards, that it was possible to be vulnerable without being destroyed. One evening, when Samuel was 8, Rose 6, and James 4, the family gathered around the dinner table for their evening meal. It had become tradition to share one thing from the day that had made each person happy or grateful. The children loved this ritual, competing to share the most interesting or funny story. When it was Evelyn's turn, she looked around the table at her family. Nathan was cutting James's meat into smaller pieces. Rose was chattering to Samuel about something that had happened with the barn cats. The lamp cast a warm glow over all of them, and she felt such a surge of love it almost hurt. "I am grateful for all of you," Evelyn said. "For this family, this life, this home, for every single moment that brought us here." Nathan met her eyes across the table, and the look he gave her said he understood. He knew she was thinking about Denver, about the journey that had led her here, about how close she had come to shutting herself off from the possibility of this happiness. Later, after the children were asleep, Nathan found her in their bedroom, brushing out her hair before bed. He came up behind her and took the brush from her hands, running it gently through her auburn locks, which now had a few threads of silver despite her being only 33. "I heard what you said at dinner," he said quietly, "about being grateful for the moments that brought you here, all of them, even the painful ones, because they led me to you." Nathan set down the brush and turned her to face him. "I think about it sometimes, how easily we could have missed each other. If you had gone to a different town, if I had not been working in that corral the day you showed up, if my mother had not needed help right at that moment. But all those things did happen. We found each other." "We found each other," he agreed. "And I have spent every day since then thanking whatever force in the universe brought you to me. That force was called desperation, and $17, Evelyn said with a smile. Nathan laughed and pulled her into his arms. "Best $17 ever spent." As they held each other in the quiet of their bedroom, with their children sleeping safely down the hall and the sounds of the ranch settling for the night outside their window, Evelyn thought about the conversation they had had all those years ago in the kitchen, when she had said she was scared of trusting again, and Nathan had told her to take her time, that he would be here waiting. He had kept that promise. Through her fear and her hesitation and her slow, careful process of learning to trust again, he had been there. Patient, steady, true to his word. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift possible, the courage to love again. The years continued to pass, bringing with them the joys and sorrows that made up a life. Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep when she was 72, surrounded by family. Samuel Sr. followed her just a year later, as though he could not bear to be without his wife. Nathan grieved deeply for his parents, but found comfort in knowing they had lived full lives and had been blessed to see their family flourish. Evelyn and Nathan became the patriarch and matriarch of the ranch, with young Samuel gradually taking on more responsibilities as he grew into a capable young man. Rose proved to have a head for business and began helping manage the ranch's finances. James discovered a love of building things and became invaluable in maintaining and improving the property. More grandchildren arrived as the years went on. Samuel married a kind, practical woman named Helen, and they gave Evelyn and Nathan 2 granddaughters. Rose married a lawyer from Sacramento, and Caroline's children from her own marriage meant that family gatherings were lively, loud affairs full of laughter and chaos. On their 20th anniversary, Nathan took Evelyn back to San Francisco. They stayed in the same hotel, walked the same streets, even found the same spot at the wharf where they had stood 10 years before. 20 years, Nathan said, shaking his head in wonder. "Where did the time go?" "Into building a life," Evelyn replied. "Into raising children and running a ranch and loving each other. Any regrets?" "Not a single one. You?" "Only that I did not meet you sooner." Evelyn smiled. "We met exactly when we were supposed to. I was not ready for you before Denver. I needed to be broken down so I could be built back up stronger. You taught me that. You taught yourself that. I just stood beside you while you did the work. You did more than that. You showed me what patience looked like, what real love looked like. You gave me the time I needed without making me feel guilty for needing it." Nathan pulled her close. "You were worth waiting for. You are worth everything." As they stood together, gray now in their hair and lines on their faces that spoke of years lived fully, Evelyn reflected on the journey they had taken together. From that first day when she had arrived at the ranch, desperate and guarded and so afraid, to this moment, secure in a love that had been tested by time and proven true. She had told him she was scared of trusting again, and he had replied that he would wait. And he had. Through months of her healing, through her slow opening up, through every moment of doubt and fear, he had been there. Not pushing, not demanding, just being present and steady and true. And that patience, that willingness to let her set the pace, had been what allowed her to trust again. Because trust, real trust, could not be forced or rushed. It had to be earned through consistent action over time. Nathan had understood that instinctively, and he had been willing to do the work of proving himself worthy. In return, Evelyn had given him everything. Her heart, her loyalty, her partnership in building a life and a family. She had let down the walls she had built around herself and allowed him in completely. And she had never, not for a single day in 20 years, regretted that decision. The trip to San Francisco became a tradition. Every 5 years, on their anniversary, they would make the journey, leaving the ranch in capable hands and spending a few days just being together. It was a way of reconnecting with each other away from the demands of daily life, of remembering who they were as individuals and as a couple. On their 30th anniversary, Evelyn was 53 and Nathan was 60. Their children were grown, with families of their own. The ranch continued to prosper under their combined management. They had weathered economic downturns, droughts, illnesses, and all the other challenges life had thrown at them. Through it all, their partnership had remained strong. 30 years, Evelyn said as they sat in a restaurant overlooking the bay, celebrating with an expensive dinner. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like we just met. Other days it feels like we have always been together. I remember being so scared, Evelyn admitted. That day in the kitchen when you told me you loved me. I remember thinking there was no way I could survive being hurt again, so I had to protect myself by not letting you in. What changed your mind? You did. You kept showing up. You kept being patient and kind and steady. You did not pressure me or try to manipulate me or make me feel bad for needing time. You just waited, exactly like you said you would. And eventually, I realized that being protected was not the same as being alive. I was existing but not living. You showed me the difference. Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. You made me a better man. Before you, I was content to just go through the motions. You gave me a reason to strive for more, to be more. You gave me a family, a purpose, a life that matters. We gave that to each other. Yes, we did. They raised their glasses in a toast, to 30 years together and to however many more they would be blessed with. As it turned out, they had another 15 years. 15 years of watching their grandchildren grow, of seeing great-grandchildren arrive, of the ranch expanding and evolving with the changing times. They aged together, their bodies slowing down but their love remaining constant. Nathan passed away at 75, peacefully in his sleep with Evelyn beside him. She woke to find him gone, and though her heart shattered with grief, she also felt profound gratitude for the life they had shared. 45 years of marriage, of partnership, of love that had started with her fear and his patience, and had grown into something beautiful and lasting. At his funeral, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all the lives that had come from the love between her and Nathan, Evelyn stood strong. She told stories of their life together, of how they had met, of his patience and kindness and unwavering devotion. Your father once told me he would wait as long as I needed, she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. And he kept that promise every single day of his life. He waited for me to heal, to trust again, to open my heart. And then he spent the rest of his life proving that my trust had been well placed. He showed me what real love looks like, and I am grateful for every moment we had together. Evelyn lived another 8 years after Nathan passed, remaining active and engaged with her family until her own health began to fail. She moved in with Samuel and Helen, who cared for her tenderly in her final years. On a warm summer evening, when she was 81 years old, Evelyn passed away in her sleep, just as Nathan had. Her family gathered for her funeral, celebrating a life well lived and a love story that had become family legend. Among her possessions, they found a journal she had kept sporadically over the years. Most of it was practical notes about household matters and observations about the children, but there was one entry that stood out, written on their 10th anniversary, that Samuel read aloud at the funeral. "I came to Sacramento broken and afraid, convinced I would never trust anyone again. But Nathan showed me that healing was possible. He waited for me with a patience I did not deserve, and he loved me with a steadiness that never wavered. He taught me that being scared was all right, that taking time was all right, that I did not have to rush or force anything. He let me heal at my own pace, and in doing so, he gave me back the ability to love fully and without reservation. I am grateful every day for the life we have built together, and I thank God that I was brave enough, eventually, to take the chance on loving him back. He was worth the risk. He was worth everything." As Samuel's voice broke reading his mother's words, the family gathered close, finding comfort in each other. They were all the product of that love story, of a scared woman and a patient cowboy who had been willing to wait as long as it took. And in the end, that patience had been rewarded with a lifetime of love, a family that spanned generations, and a legacy that would endure long after both Nathan and Evelyn were gone. Their story became one passed down through the family, a reminder that real love was patient, that healing took time, and that the best things in life were worth waiting for. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through Samuel and his children, and eventually to his grandchildren. The little cottage Nathan had built for Evelyn was preserved and maintained, becoming a sort of shrine to their love story. Young couples in the family would sometimes stay there, hoping some of that enduring love would rub off on them. Years after Evelyn's death, when great-great-grandchildren played in the yard where Nathan had first seen Evelyn looking for work, the story was still told. About how she had said she was scared of trusting again, and how the cowboy had replied that he would wait. About how he had kept that promise, and how their patient, steady love had built something that lasted not just a lifetime, but generations. It was a love story born from pain and fear, nurtured by patience and kindness, and sustained by commitment and partnership. It was proof that even the most wounded heart could heal given enough time and the right person. It was a testament to the power of waiting, of earning trust rather than demanding it, of understanding that the best things in life could not be rushed. Nathan and Evelyn Whitfield had built more than just a ranch and a family. They had built a legacy of love that showed what was possible when someone was willing to wait, and someone else was brave enough to eventually trust again. Their story lived on, inspiring generation after generation to be patient, to be kind, to give people the time they needed to heal, and to never give up on the possibility of love, even when fear tried to convince them otherwise. In the end, it was a simple story. A woman who had been hurt learned to trust again. A man who loved her gave her the time she needed. And together, they built a life that was worth all the waiting, worth all the fear, worth everything. Their love story was not complicated or dramatic in the grand sense. It was simply two people choosing each other, day after day, year after year, through all the challenges and joys life brought them. It was patient love, steady love, enduring love. The kind of love that changed lives and built legacies. And it all started with a scared woman and a cowboy who was willing to wait.